the father of 3 world religions, a man with whom God himself had made an eternal covenant, twice gave his wife to bed to foreign kings, marrying her off as his sister, received a fortune in gold and cattle for this, and when the deception was revealed, pagan rulers, whom the Bible calls godless, gave him a dressing down for immorality and released him, in peace. Abraham is a righteous man who traded his own wife as a commodity, and who repeated this transaction twice, as if the first time had not taught him anything, and God, instead of punishing the coward, continued to bless him and call him a friend. Sarah was so beautiful that at the age of 65 men were still losing their heads over her appearance, and when she turned 90 the kings were still ready to take her to their harems, which in itself seems incredible and makes you wonder what kind of woman this was. But for Abraham, his wife's beauty turned not into a blessing, but into a constant source of fear, and no matter how cynical it sounds, into an opportunity to take advantage of a dangerous situation. When famine struck Canaan, Abraham and his family and flocks went to Egypt, the richest and most powerful country of that time, where the pharaohs ruled like gods on earth and where a foreigner had no rights. On the border of Egypt, when the first border posts appeared and the guards began to inspect the caravans, Abraham suddenly realized the scale of the problem. If the Egyptians saw the beauty of Sarah and found out that she was his wife, they would simply kill him and take the woman by force, because in those days the life of a nomad foreigner was worth nothing. Abraham came up with a plan that was supposed to save his life, but which a modern person would call monstrous. He asked Sarah to pretend to be his sister, technically not completely lying, because she really was his paternal half-sister, but keeping silent about the main thing, that she was his wife. "Please tell me that you are my sister, so that I may be well for you, and my soul will be alive because of you," he said to the woman he had lived with for decades, essentially asking her to sacrifice herself for his safety. How did Sarah feel at that moment? The Bible is silent about this, not saving us a word of her answer, nor her emotions, leaving only the cold fact. She agreed to this terrifying plan, perhaps out of love, perhaps out of submission, perhaps simply having no other choice in a patriarchal world where a woman was property. Exactly what Abraham was afraid of happened, although some interpreters suspect that he was not just afraid, but also counting on it. The Egyptian nobles saw Sarah, were amazed by her beauty, and immediately reported this discovery to the pharaoh, praising the charms of the foreigner, who, as they were told, was the sister of a rich cattle farmer. The pharaoh, ruler of the greatest empire of antiquity, became interested and ordered the woman to be brought to the palace, and her brother Abraham was generously paid for the right to take his sister into the harem, which was the accepted practice of the time. The Bible coolly lists the price of the deal, and it was well for Abraham for her sake, and he had flocks and herds and donkeys and male slaves and female slaves and donkeys and camels, a fortune received for his wife, whom he called sister. Sarah was taken to Pharaoh's house, to the royal harem, where she was being groomed to become one of the wives of the most powerful man on earth, and Abraham did nothing to stop it, enjoying the wealth he received and probably convincing himself that he had no choice. But then God intervened in history, and he intervened not for Abraham, who was quietly grazing his newly acquired flocks, but for innocent Sarah, and oddly enough, for the deceived Pharaoh. The Lord struck Pharaoh and his entire household with great plagues, diseases so severe and inexplicable that the Egyptian priests and doctors were powerless, and the king realized that this was a punishment from above for the woman he had taken. When the truth was revealed, perhaps through a prophetic dream, perhaps through Sarah's own confession, Pharaoh was furious, but his rage was righteous. He called Abraham and uttered words that sound like a guilty verdict against a coward and a liar. "What is this that you have done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say that she was your sister, so that I took her to be my wife?" The pagan Pharaoh, whom the Bible usually describes as an enemy of God's people, turned out to be more honest and decent than the righteous Abraham, because he did not want to touch someone else's wife, and was outraged by the deception that put him at risk of God's wrath. Pharaoh not only did not punish the deceiver, but also allowed him to leave with all his wealth. Moreover, he ordered his men to escort Abraham and Sarah to the border, so that they could safely leave Egypt, ridding the country of the wrath of their God. Abraham came out of Egypt incomparably richer than he entered, having received a financial reward for his wife's lies and betrayal, and it would seem that this terrifying lesson should have weaned him forever from such schemes. But years passed, and Abraham repeated the same trick, this time with King Abimelech in the land of Gerar. And this second story is even more shocking, because at the time of the event Sarah was already 90 years old, and she was still so beautiful that the kings wanted to marry her. Abraham, as if he had not learned any lessons from the Egyptian catastrophe, again introduced Sarah as his sister, and King Abimelech, acting in full accordance with the customs of the time, took her into his house, intending to marry her. But this time, God intervened even faster. That night, he appeared to Abimelech in a dream and said bluntly, "Behold, you will die for the woman whom you have taken, for she has a husband." Abimelech, who had not yet touched Sarah, was horrified and outraged at the same time. He pointed out to God that he had acted in ignorance and with a pure heart, because he had been told that she was a sister. God agreed. "I know that you did this in the simplicity of your heart, and I restrained you from sinning against me," acknowledging that Abraham was the real culprit. In the morning, Abimelech gave Abraham a conversation that was supposed to shame the patriarch. "What have you done to us, and in what have I sinned against you, that you have brought upon me and upon my kingdom a great sin? You have done things to me that are not done." The king of the Gentiles was lecturing the righteous, and it was the moment when the mask of piety had to fall from Abraham's face, exposing his fear, weakness, and willingness to trade his wife for his own safety. Abraham tried to justify himself, and his justification sounds pathetic. "I thought that there was no fear of God in this place, and they would kill me for my wife. Yes, she is truly my sister, the daughter of my father, only not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." In fact, he accused the inhabitants of Gerar of godlessness, although it was Abimelech who showed more decency and fear of God than the patriarch himself. But the most cynical thing about this explanation is Abraham's admission that this scheme was his, and Sarah's constant survival strategy. "When God took me on a journey from my father's house, I said to her, 'Do me this favor, wherever we go, say about me, this is my brother.'" That is, it was their pre-planned deception, which they turned out in each new place, using Sarah's beauty as a shield. For Abraham, it is also a source of enrichment. And again, as with Pharaoh, Abimelech did not punish the deceiver, but on the contrary gave him generously. He gave him sheep and cattle, slaves and female slaves, returned Sarah and said, "Behold, my land is before you, live wherever it pleases you." Moreover, he gave Sarah 1,000 pieces of silver as a veil of the eyes, compensation, which was supposed to restore her reputation in front of everyone, proving that she had not been touched. God demanded that Abraham, a prophet and a righteous man, pray for Abimelech and his house, who were stricken with infertility because of Sarah, and only after the prayer of the deceiver healed those who suffered innocently. It was a strange and disturbing lesson. A man who twice sold his wife into the hands of other kings out of fear for his own life still remained God's chosen one, whose prayers had the power to heal.